So, Serafina, what do you do? That was all it took. One polite question from my brother's fiancée, posed with a gentle smile across a table set with linen napkins and bone china. And my mother let out a brittle laugh. "Oh, she doesn't really do anything," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "She plays with computers or something, nothing important." And just like that, I was 13 again. Invisible at the table, reduced to a quiet shadow beside the family's golden boy. Hi. My name is Serafina Lorne, and I've learned to live with silence. Not peaceful silence, no. The kind that forms when you're talked over, dismissed, ignored. The kind that clings to your skin like secondhand smoke. I used to think if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, I'd break through it. They'd see me. They didn't. Not until Lena reached for her phone, typed in my name, and turned the entire room inside out. I didn't come home for confrontation. I didn't come to show off. I came because that's what daughters do, even forgotten ones. But that night, the silence broke. Not with shouting, not with speeches. Just truth. Undeniable, indisputable. Walking in uninvited and taking its seat at the table. And in that moment, I realized, the loudest kind of revenge is the one you don't deliver yourself. My parents' home looked exactly the same as it always had. Immaculate, symmetrical, unchanging. The white shutters gleamed like they had something to prove, and the boxwood hedges stood trimmed with military precision. It was the kind of house that made you straighten your back without realizing, that reminded you who you used to be before you built a life of your own. Inside, the smell of rosemary chicken and baked squash wrapped around me like a net I hadn't consented to walk into. My mother's cooking always smelled like duty, comfort once, but now it meant expectations, standards I was never meant to meet. I arrived last. As always. The dining room buzzed with a familiar hum, wine glasses clinking, polite laughter choreographed to land at the right volume. At the center of it all sat my brother Graham, with Lena nestled beside him like an accessory that complemented the whole scene too perfectly. "Serafina, sweetie, you're here," my mother said, with a tone that sounded more like relief than welcome. "Sit, sit!" There was only one seat left. It faced Lena directly, all the way at the far end, just close enough to not be excluded, but far enough to not be included. I took my place, smoothed down my coat, and offered a quiet, "Hi." Heads turned. A few nodded. The attention span of a goldfish might have outlasted their interest. Graham didn't even look up. I'd worn navy blue, understated but elegant. I'd done my hair in soft waves, taken the time. I even wore mascara, which I hated. And still, I may as well have walked in wearing a paper bag. Across the table, my mother poured wine with flourish and asked Lena about her parents' lake house in Maine. My father jumped in with his latest thoughts on bond markets. Graham laughed at something only he and Lena found funny. The space between their chairs didn't exist. It all looked so polished, so seamless, like a catalog family having a catalog meal. You'd never know that the girl sitting 6 chairs down once cried in this very dining room after winning a National Tech Award. Because no one asked how it went. They were too busy discussing Graham's apartment renovations. I used to wonder what it would take to matter at this table. When I landed my first contract, I told them. My mother responded by asking if I'd thought about applying for a government job instead. More stable, honey. When I moved to Boston to launch Click Helix, Dad blinked and asked if I'd finally figured out what I wanted to do with my life. That hurt more than I ever admitted. Because I had figured it out. I'd poured myself into building something from the ground up, while they still thought I was just tinkering with code in my bedroom. Tonight wasn't supposed to be any different. I kept my eyes on my plate, cut into the roast slowly, deliberately. If I ate slowly enough, maybe I wouldn't have to speak. Maybe I wouldn't be asked to perform. The voices around me blurred into a soft drone, the kind you hear just before a headache forms. Occasionally, someone would throw a glance my way, like checking a clock, but no one asked how I was. No one ever did. Being invisible has a rhythm. Once you settle into it, you learn how to survive by not expecting anything at all. Until Lena broke the pattern. I hadn't expected much from her. She was new and pretty, and seemingly gentle in the way that women are taught to be when meeting their fiancé's family. She wore pearl earrings and a blush silk blouse. She called my mother ma'am and complimented her cooking like it came from a script. But then, midway through the salad course, she turned toward me with curiosity, real curiosity, and said, "So, Serafina, what do you do?" The question fell like a stone into still water. Not because it was rude. It wasn't. It was polite, sincere. But at this table, it was an alarm bell, something you weren't supposed to ask. My mother laughed, sharp, automatic, brittle. "Oh, she doesn't really do anything, dear," she said, tilting her head toward Lena like they were old friends sharing a joke. "She dabbles in computers. Some online stuff, nothing serious." The table chuckled politely. I didn't. It was one thing to be overlooked, another to be rewritten. I clenched my hands beneath the table. I wanted to say something. I wanted to correct her, to reclaim my voice. But the moment had already started to pass, just like it always did. And then Lena tilted her head, looked at me again. Not pitying, just curious. A tiny wrinkle formed between her brows. She reached for her phone. My heart ticked louder in my chest. Not because I feared being exposed, but because I knew what she was about to find. And they didn't. The moment stretched like taffy. My mother resumed talking, oblivious. Graham hadn't noticed, but Lena's thumbs were moving quickly across her screen, and something was about to snap. I watched Lena's eyes as they flicked over her screen. At first, there was polite interest. Then came the pause. Her lips parted slightly. Her brows lifted. And then, silence. Dead, pressing silence. My mother was still talking about the herb garden. Graham was pouring more wine. But Lena had stopped breathing. She looked up, then looked back down, then back at me. "Wait," she said, barely above a whisper. This is you?" It didn't come out like an accusation. It came out like revelation. The table went still. Not the quiet kind. The kind that has weight. Dad stopped mid-sentence. Graham froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. My mother blinked twice, still catching up. Lena slowly turned the screen around. It was an article from Forbes. My photo, head held high, blazer sharp, a smile I'd practiced for weeks with a PR coach, stared back at the entire Lorne family. The headline was impossible to miss. Serafina Lorne, founder of ClickHelix, is quietly redefining AI logistics. My mother's smile cracked. She looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under her. Her mouth opened, then closed, twice. Graham blinked. That's not real, is it?" he said, voice uneven. Lena answered for me. "She's been featured in TechCrunch, Fast Company, and Business Insider. Your company's valued at, what, 15 million? You gave a keynote at the MIT Innovation Forum." She turned back to me, voice rising with excitement. "Serafina, why didn't you say anything?" I took a slow breath. It didn't seem relevant. Lena stared at me, like I had said I grew wings in the car. The rest of the table didn't move. My mother recovered first, barely. "Well," she said with a strained laugh, "you know how these tech things are. So volatile. Not really like a proper job." My jaw clenched. She couldn't even give me this. Lena wasn't having it. No offense, but if this isn't a proper job, what is? She's the CEO of a major tech firm. She built something most people couldn't even imagine. Do you know how hard that is? My father cleared his throat, the way he always did when he wanted to change topics but had no idea where to go. Graham looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. I should have been basking in it, the moment, the look on their faces, years of being overlooked, outshined, packaged neatly into the quiet one who works with computers. And now the truth was unignorable. But I wasn't smiling, because this wasn't triumph. Not really. This was exposure. The story they'd written about me, insignificant, forgettable, had just been torn to shreds by facts they never cared to ask about, and now they were scrambling to make sense of it. Lena leaned in. "How did you even come up with the idea for ClickHelix?" I looked at her. She meant it. This wasn't small talk. I hesitated, then spoke. I used to work in back-end systems for an online retailer. Everything was inefficient. Delayed shipments, mismanaged inventory, poor forecasting. I thought, I could fix that. I started coding a prototype at night. Then I quit. Took everything I had, maxed out my cards, spent months living on ramen and spreadsheets. Her eyes widened. You're kidding! I'm really not. Across the table, no one interrupted. For the first time in my life, I was speaking, and they were listening. We launched our first beta with 3 small businesses in Boston. They saw inventory errors drop by 40%. I took those numbers, built a deck, and pitched to 10 investors. 1 bit. The rest is Googleable, I guess. Lena laughed, warm, delighted, unbothered by the stunned stares around her. That's incredible, she said. And you've scaled it to, what, nationwide? North America. We just signed 2 Canadian logistics chains. My mother made a noise in her throat, like she was trying to swallow her surprise and pretend it wasn't new. My father looked down at his plate like it had personally betrayed him. And Graham, he was still staring at me. But now there was something different in his eyes, recognition, maybe even something close to respect. I didn't need it, not anymore. But I saw it, and I filed it away like a receipt I'd never use. Lena had more questions. What our team looked like, how we handled funding rounds, what the biggest hurdle had been. I answered all of them, not to show off, but because, for once, I didn't have to shrink. When I stopped speaking, the silence returned. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not the kind that shuts you out. The kind that doesn't know what to do with you. I sat back, folded my napkin neatly in my lap, and let it settle. Dinner continued technically. Plates were passed, glasses refilled, but the performance had broken. The choreography was off. No one quite knew what role to play anymore. My mother, usually the star of the table, had gone unusually quiet. She picked at her food like it might bite her. The tension clung to her shoulders like a second sweater. My father attempted a return to politics, something about economic forecasts and trade tariffs, but his voice didn't carry the same certainty. Every word sounded hollow, like he was reading aloud from a page he no longer believed in. Graham. He was somewhere else, still looking at me like he was trying to rearrange all his mental files. I wasn't the little sister who fixed the Wi-Fi anymore. I was the one building systems entire companies now depended on. Lena, bless her, kept the air alive. She steered conversation back to business, asked follow-ups that showed she'd been paying attention. Not to be polite, but because she was genuinely impressed. She was the only one at that table who didn't flinch around the truth. After dessert, pecan tart with whipped cream, untouched on half the plates, we moved to the living room. Same plush furniture, same heavy drapes, but everything felt different now. Lena caught me by the arm near the hallway. Seriously, she whispered, that was incredible. I mean, I knew you were smart, but damn. I gave her a small smile. Thanks, and thank you for Googling me. She laughed. I figured if no one was going to give me the real story, I'd find it myself. She meant it as a compliment. But it hit deeper than she realized, because no one at that table had ever wanted the real story. Later, as Lena and Graham slipped on their coats by the door, she hugged me, warm, genuine, not the brittle, obligatory kind my family specialized in. We should talk more, she said. I'd love to pick your brain sometime. I know a few people in venture, women-led funds. If you're ever raising... I nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Graham lingered a second longer. He looked unsure, like he wanted to say something, but hadn't decided how honest he was ready to be. That company of yours, he said slowly, hands in his pockets. Click Helix. I had no idea. I tilted my head. Clearly. He flinched. Not visibly, but I saw it. Years of casual dismissal don't vanish in one evening. But he tried. Lena's friends, some of them are investors. She mentioned you might be looking for connections. There it was. I paused, held his gaze for just a second too long. Thanks, I said, voice even. But we're good. Current investors are solid. We've already got our next round planned. He nodded, looking more disappointed than he expected to be. As he stepped outside, I closed the door behind him softly. That was the moment I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not bitter, just done. The house grew quiet again. My mother appeared in the hallway, arms crossed, a strange softness behind her eyes. "Serafina," she said, like the name finally meant something. "Why didn't you ever tell us? About the company, the articles? All of it?" I turned toward her. My father stood a few feet behind, his hands folded like a schoolboy caught skipping class. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I did. Remember when I brought up the prototype? You said it sounded cute, but unstable. You told me to look into teaching." My mother looked like she wanted to protest, but thought better of it. "And the first round of funding," I added. "I mentioned it at dinner once. Dad asked if Graham needed help paying off his car lease." They both looked at me, unsure whether to deny or apologize. "We just didn't understand," my father said, quieter than I'd ever heard him. "It's all this tech stuff. It's not like our generation." "It's not about understanding," I said gently. "It's about listening." My mother blinked. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "We're proud of you," she whispered. "We just didn't show it well." I nodded once. That was enough. I didn't need a parade. I just needed them to finally sit with the discomfort they'd spent years avoiding. When I left that night, the driveway was dark. The stars were clear. Vermont skies always held more stars than Boston's. My phone buzzed on the way home. A message from Graham. "Hey, Seraph, Lena's really impressed. She knows a couple of firms looking to fund Series B tech plays. Want me to set up intros?" I stared at the screen. A year ago, I'd have said yes in a heartbeat. Now? I typed, "Thanks, but no need. We're already locked in for the next round." And hit send. It wasn't revenge. It was preservation. Not every door needs to stay open just because someone finally noticed there's gold behind it. The drive back to Boston was quiet, but not heavy. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying a weight I couldn't name. I wasn't rehearsing arguments in my head or replaying wounds that never got acknowledged. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was free. I passed the state line under a sky full of stars, headlights cutting through the dark like a promise. The world hadn't changed, but something in me had. And once that shift happens, there's no going back. That dinner hadn't been a victory lap. It hadn't been a performance. I didn't come in with a PowerPoint, didn't throw my achievements in anyone's face. I just showed up. And the truth followed me in like a silent guest, sat down, and made itself comfortable. The irony, of course, is that I had tried to tell them, so many times, about the sleepless nights, the empty bank account, the early investors, the failed prototypes, the first breakthrough, the first client who said yes. I had offered all those pieces to them in casual conversation, hoping one day they'd realize I was building something real. Every time they changed the subject, every time they talked over it, smoothed it into silence. Until Lena, an outsider, a stranger to our family dynamic, Googled me. That's all it took. A search bar, a few taps, and years of dismissal unraveled in 30 seconds. There's a certain poetic justice in that. And when Graham texted me, eager to loop in Lena's VC friends like he'd discovered me himself, I felt nothing sharp, just clarity. If I said yes, I'd be inviting him into a success he never believed in, only now found valuable because someone else had stamped it as such. That wasn't a door I needed to reopen. Some silences are better left intact, and when my mother asked me, with tears in her eyes, why I never told them, I didn't argue. I reminded her I had. She just hadn't been listening. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. That part isn't up to me. What is up to me is how I carry myself forward. So if you've ever been underestimated, talked over, or pushed into the margins by your own family, I see you, and I hope you know you don't owe them a performance. You don't have to become louder to be real. Your worth doesn't hinge on their understanding. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success. Quiet, undeniable, and yours alone. Build in silence. Grow in the shadows. And when the light finds you, don't shrink. Stand tall. Let them stare.